Well, welcome back to Comic Book Historians. I'm Alex Grand. Go ahead and click on that ruby red subscribe button down below. Now, in a previous episode, I discussed how the golden age of cinema and its movie stars affected the golden age of comic books. But it should also be noted that the golden age of horror and science fiction also affected the genesis of both golden and the silver age of comic books. Now, technically speaking, The Man Who Laughs 1928 isn't part of the 1930s Universal horror films, but it acts as a precursor since makeup artist Jack Pierce designed the look of Conrad Veidt's character, setting the look for the silver screen. Now, this name, Jack Pierce as makeup artist, is going to be more influential than most people would tend to think. Now, Jerry Robinson, Bob Kane, and Bill Finger all have mentioned Conrad Veidt in their genesis of the Joker character. An interesting note about the 1928 film The Man Who Laughs is that it was originally going to star Lon Chaney. Chaney would have portrayed the character, however, his studio contract pulled him away from the part, opening the door for Jack Pierce to be Conrad Veidt's makeup artist. And this is basically because Lon Chaney Sr. did his own makeup, whereas without Lon Chaney, then the next actor, Conrad Veidt, would have required someone like Jack Pierce to do his makeup for him. Another role that Lon Chaney was supposed to take part in was for Universal in 1931 Dracula. Unfortunately, Lon Chaney died from complications of lung cancer in 1930, and that prevented him from playing the role of Dracula. And that opened the door for Bela Lugosi to play this very influential character, who also had the very same Jack Pierce be his makeup artist and develop his look as Dracula. Lugosi's portrayal of Dracula set the stage for the bat-linked character, which chilled audiences at the time. He unnerved viewers with his long black cape and dark, mysterious demeanor. Now, Batman scared criminals with similar techniques, attacking in the dark, using their own fears of the dark against them in a similar caped bat aesthetic. Batman: The Complete History by Les Daniels writes that Bob Kane admitted that one of his inspirations was Bela Lugosi's performance in the 1931 movie Dracula. That's not hard to imagine because the body language that both Batman and Dracula use to scare their victims is exactly the same. Makeup artist Jack Pierce's influence continues again in the 1931 horror film Frankenstein, where numerous interviews by Pierce and others confirmed that he developed the look and appearance of Frankenstein's monster over a 4-month period. Every day that there was to be a scene with the Frankenstein's monster, both Jack Pierce and Boris Karloff woke up very early in the morning and over a 4-hour period would put makeup on to create the monster's look that we know today. Large, hulking, and misunderstood, the Frankenstein's monster was generally drawn to female beauty and was chased away by angry, scared citizens. Stan Lee remarked the inspiration of Karloff's Frankenstein monster toward the Hulk character that he co-created with Jack Kirby. In 2015, Stan Lee said, "I remembered Jekyll and Hyde and the Frankenstein movie with Boris Karloff, and it always seemed to me that the monster was really the good guy. He didn't want to hurt anybody, but those idiots kept chasing him up the hill until he had to strike back. So why not get a guy who looks like a monster and really doesn't want to cause any harm? But he has to in self-defense because people are always attacking him." An odd coincidence is that both characters started gray until they were colored to green. Jack Pierce also did the makeup for The Invisible Man 1933, another Universal horror film. The Invisible Man didn't have much control over his powers and is a tragic figure. The same can be said for Negative Man from Doom Patrol in 1963. Same bandages and same inability to control his powers, sharing the same sense of tragedy. In 1935, Werewolf of London came out with the same makeup artist, Jack Pierce, who made this character distinct with an arched widow's peak and feral, animalistic features. This appearance was used by Wally Wood in his 1967 character Annie Man. Dave Cockrum apprenticed under Wally Wood on the newspaper strip character Shattuck in 1972, and then applied this haircut to his version of Timberwolf for DC Comics in the Legion of Superheroes 1973. When Dave Cockrum co-created the X-Men, he finally unmasked Wolverine and gave him the same features as all 3 previous characters. Interestingly enough, it seems that Wolverine's face could be considered a byproduct of makeup artist Jack Pierce's genius. The 1940 film Dr. Cyclops, written by Tom Kilpatrick, is about a mad scientist who shrinks humans to reduce their impact on the environment. The imagery is very similar to Simon and Kirby's panels of Shrinking Blue Bolt in the same year. By the 1950s, horror and suspense got shifted over culturally toward the golden age of science fiction. And this new wave of films was making a significant impact on the Silver Age of comics. After the success of the 1950 movie Robert Heinlein's Destination Moon, the science fiction film genre was in full swing with classics like 1951's The Man from Planet X, which influenced comic writers jumping onto that science fiction bandwagon. A lot of these themes percolated into the 1960s, especially with this specific example in Marvel's Fantastic Four 7 1962, The Master of Planet X. But it doesn't stop there. The superior, evil, and menacing extraterrestrial female is its own interesting science fiction subgenre with the pace set by the Devil Girl from Mars in 1954. This seems really similar to Ursa from Superman 2 1980, as well as Feora in Man of Steel 2013, and Ursa again shown here in Action Comics Annual 10 2007. It seems like leather black outfits fit really well here. Now, 1955's Day the World Ended is about radiation and how it distorted a man into a mutated, super strong, and misunderstood monster. This brand of science fiction percolated into comics in many anthology books and was a central core of Ben Grimm, The Thing in Fantastic Four 1, 1961. Although Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's monster heroes, The Thing and the Hulk, seem to descend from the previous monster comics, well, a lot of those monster comics seem to be coming from the movies. The Hideous Sun Demon 1958 sticks out as a very similar concept specifically to the Hulk. Research scientist Dr. Gilbert McKenna is accidentally exposed to radiation during an experiment and ends up changing into a strong, monstrous creature regularly during the day-night cycle. Now, before Steve Ditko helped make anger the primary trigger for the Hulk in later issues, in the Hulk's earlier issues, his day-night cycle was what cycled him between Bruce Banner and the Hulk in a very similar fashion. This is basically a radioactive take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The movies did it first. Now, this similarity of the Hulk to the movies doesn't stop here. He's also similar in his origin to another movie. This next 1957 film, The Amazing Colossal Man, has an origin of his powers which is exactly the same. A military radioactive bomb test in the desert goes wrong when an innocent falls into the testing center, and the main character who works for the military rushes in to save him, and in the process is burned by radiation in the bomb and develops super strength.
Sounds like a plane.
Losing altitude fast.
Colonel, that bomb could go off any second. That pilot could be alive. What about the bomb?
It's still activated, Colonel. Once the chain reaction has been triggered, there's nothing we can do to stop it.
Colonel, no!
Now, Attack of the Crab Monsters 1957 has a fun science fiction trope of a team of curious protagonists exploring an island and finding themselves chased by large crab monsters. Now, this Monster Island trope was used initially in Fantastic Four 1 1961 and then used again in Giant Size X-Men 1 1975. And this also works for 1961's Mysterious Island. Now, sometimes it goes the other way around. Sometimes the comic will actually influence the movie. In this case, we're talking about the 1996 Mars Attacks film, which was based off of the Wally Wood Saunders trading cards for Topps in 1962. Those cards were actually an expansion on the Wally Wood cover for Weird Science 16 1952, which featured the big brain alien monster also showed in This Island Earth 1955. One of the smart things to add to the science fiction, fantasy, or horror genre was the focus on teenagers in 1957 and 1958. I Was a Teenage Werewolf, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, and I Was a Teenage Caveman all did well for the drive-in market, and that theme seemed to continue into the concept of the teenage superhero in the first appearance of Spider-Man and the Uncanny X-Men. I mean, theoretically, the title of X-Men could be I Was a Teenage Mutant. Now, it's undeniable that movies affected comics in both the Golden and Silver Ages. And although we are definitely in a cycle of life where the concepts are now reflecting into the movies, it's an interesting time to be alive. We're now seeing the opposite thing happen than what was going on before. But it's always nice to look back and give credit to where some of these original ideas actually came from.